Okay, we are recording. Thank you everybody for joining us. What?
Is the microphone on?
Yeah,
you're gonna double check it, yeah.
I'm just saying, you
I thought he was here to make sure that stuff, but apparently that's not the case. If I could have everybody just identify themselves, Chaz, we'll start with you, just go around the table.
What do you need to just name?
Name
Chaz?
and title, yeah.
Chaz Pasanko, the IT staff manager.
Rob Mezzanotte, Assistant Superintendent.
Stephanie Russo, HR Director.
Andrew Hennius, attorney for the district.
Erin Earl, school committee chair.
Kenny Dubas, Superintendent.
Jennifer Lima, school committee member.
Joe Visturo, Finance Director.
Magdalena Osteen, students at the high school.
Michael Waterman, Chief Operating Officer.
Awesome, thank you. I don't see anybody here for citizens' comments. Again, just for clarity's sake, the voting members of this committee are myself, Ken, Erin, and Rob. I don't know, did everybody get a chance to review the draft minutes from the last meeting?
Yes.
Anybody have any questions?
No.
Okay. I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
All in favor?
I wasn't here, so.
Okay. Okay, so we have a bunch of policies basically to follow up on from the GCB, but we do have a new policy that's being proposed by the IT department. It's called a WISP, which is a written information security program. If nobody objects, I'd like to move that up to the beginning.
Motion to accept that.
Second.
Okay. All right, Mike?
And just to stand corrected, it is a written information security policy, so it's not strictly IT. It also has to do with paper documents, so it does extend beyond the IT department. I know specifically, I believe HR is mentioned in here, and in a moment I'm going to turn over to Chaz as he serves as the lead on this. But there's written information as far as human resources, key management from facilities. So it is more than just an IT. Obviously, a lot of it revolves around cybersecurity, but it is more than just IT related. So,
Jen, what letter? Oh, it doesn't. There is letter. New policy A. Did you get the? Did I send
It's
you?
not linked. I have to go
No,
find it
because
somewhere else.
it's not a. It doesn't actually.
Not a problem, I will
exist.
go find it.
I will send it to you. I think I sent it to everybody, but I will.
No, I'm sure it was me.
I have it up if I can help. I can send it to whomever.
Can you just ping me on it? Can you just?
Yep.
Thanks.
Just doing it now.
Can you do the same for me, Mike?
Yep, I've got it right here. I'll send it to everybody. Okay.
Sorry, so the purpose of this, as Mike kind of briefly went over, is that it's mostly being headed by the IT department because cybersecurity is the larger kind of overarching problem that kind of triggered a lot of this. But it will. The point of the policy in general is we need to be able to have the district needs to be able to have some sort of genuine, written, enforceable policy that pretty much encompasses all information security. There's a couple reasons for this. The one reason is just it's good practice, and we don't have one, and we really should. It's kind of to force us HR facilities to make sure that we're following best practice at all times. And the second reason that really kind of strung it along faster is insurance. Unfortunately, with the amount of money and attacks that ransomware has had, especially on K-12, there have been a lot of requirements from the trust over the last year or so. One that probably everyone has just adapted to was multi-factor authentication. That one was a hard deadline. This is another one that's on the list, and while not needed now in the immediate, it is on their docket of things that they will be requiring if we want to be able to keep cyber insurance. And unfortunately, again, this is more than just cyber, but it's a lot about cyber. The reality is that there's so much complexity and unfortunately money to be lost with it. So this is one of our ways to protect ourselves as a district, and also to ensure people like myself and Andy and Bob and Stephanie, we all cover things. So I'm not sure exactly what we want to go over since we have it in front, but I can hit some key bullet points if you'd like. And I think it's also important to note that the trust, the Rhode Island Interlocal Trust, gave all school districts a template policy.
Okay.
So much of this is cut and paste, find and replace. This is what the trust
Is there
wants us to do.
Correct. And there's some small things that we've made that make a little more sense for our environment, but it's mostly them. So we have a pretty good hit here. There's a couple key things I guess we can go over that kind of are key to this. The first would be on here, besides the obvious objective, but things like Section 3 with risk assessment. Something that rather difficult is to perform proper risk and analysis on our own systems. Unfortunately, I would love to be able to say that us in the IT department are all expertly cybersecurity trained. We're just not. So we need to make sure, though, that we are following the practices as best to our ability, and also know and have set forth methods that we're going to need to ensure in order to be able to test them. Those things can extend to, like, if I use some phrases that you don't know, I apologize. But like penetration testing, which is a big one that tests our network and securities for holes and flaws and exploits. We are going to have to be able to do that, not just internally, but we need to have someone external do it so that way it's an unbiased review. We do have things that are people that will be able to assist us with that. The Department of Homeland Security has actually been very helpful. They offer a lot of assistance with it. So some of it is at no cost to us, which is great. But there may be at some point, we just don't know what that will look like, but this is to ensure that we have to at least act on those things. We have to be able to be audited on our own security.
And to clarify, the assessments may be of no cost, but what they find could end up costing.
To fix.
Correct.
So just a question that I have listened to Chad's talk about this. Is this like one of these policies that is not going to be public because is it a blueprint to what we're doing?
No, so the policy itself can be public, but the details of the program that it requires. So in the beginning of the objective, just to clarify, the policy directs us to make a program revolving around protocols and procedures on how we have to operate. For the sake of security, yes, we obviously cannot have those be public. The policy can be stating that we have a WISP, but the details of it should not be. For that. Let's see, where are some key? Oh, so yeah, I guess so. The two larger points after the risk. So it breaks down to three major points of this. One is to audit ourselves, or have something and hold us accountable, and the other two would be the electronic and the non-electronic. What am I looking for? Like pieces to protect here. Cyber is the larger drive of this. So server, network protection, student data, personal data, payroll, all of that information. We need to make sure that we are following best practice on that. This kind of forces our hand to make sure we're doing it, which is good. The district needs that for sure to make sure that we're always on top of things, especially in an ever-changing and adaptable technological world. But it does extend to the non-electronic stuff as well. So people accessing personal and finance records that are paper. We need to make sure that we have systems and logs of who accesses and can access those. Keys to buildings is one that I can't speak too much to, but Bob would have a better understanding, Bob Krenti. But that would be a thing that we need to actually be able to track and monitor and log. So the point of this, to not get too down the hole of it, is we need to ensure that we ourselves as a district are being held to all of this. But the really beneficial part to having this as a district policy as well is it allows us to ensure that third-party vendors that we work with have to understand these are the rules that we are set by and have to hold. We already do that with a lot of data privacy agreements with student data and software. This now changes that from a thing that we've all agreed on to a thing that we have to do. And that really helps us negotiate and also make sure that the companies and software especially, a lot of software companies actually do that since they're notorious for loving to sell data.
So have we cross-referenced, because we just did this recently when I was in Jamestown last year, so have we cross-referenced with the WISP, with other processes or procedures that we have in district around confidentiality of data and personnel and use of data and where records are stored? Has that been done yet, or do we need to still do that and then make sure we have those written procedures in place?
Correct. We would need to, once this is in place, once this is our framework, then we would take the next step.
And as far as the cybersecurity, has any training been conducted with staff prior to this on any cybersecurity and risks
So
management?
Kim Ramos has done some trainings. Kim Ramos, our tech lead teacher, has done some trainings. We also so some of the lead times for some of the penetration testing, phishing testing is quite long. So I know we've entered into the queue. We actually conducted a phishing assessment winter spring, and we're awaiting results. So that was quite a long term, and we do know that the test did go out because some people did report suspicious emails. So we do know. What we don't have is, right, we have not received the results of that assessment yet.
No,
Mike, they gotta come to the mic or.
You get to come up,
Or
man.
you can come sit at the table.
It was through some subgroup of Homeland Security, and I guess they expanded a little too fast, and they had some issues, so they put it on hold.
Okay.
I think it was about a week before we were supposed to get our results. They said, yeah, we had some problems, we'll get back to you.
Okay.
Is this something we need to look at, having an outside source do the training, or not do the training, but do this work for us with, kind of testing our own people on phishing and spams and...
So, and that's what that was. So they essentially sent out a series of different phishing emails, and it was going to track. I don't think we were going to see individuals, right? Like we wouldn't see if
Correct.
Charles Pazanko or Andy Mello clicked on it, but whatever group,
It give you
whatever-
like an assessment of like how your district did, how many
Correct.
people clicked on it, how many people got fooled.
whatever
Yeah.
Google group they're in. So like if they're in the Google group
Yeah.
of teachers, we would see, okay, of the 400 teachers or people in the teachers group, 10 clicked on it. But in the IT group of 15 people, 14 clicked on it. So we would know we have to focus our training on the IT group. So it would give us data to know which populations might we have to do some more targeted training on. But that was the results that we have not received as of yet.
So that, Mike, that gives you a good assessment of kind of like where there are opportunities for like additional training, but what, can you give us some information about like kind of that baseline of like, do people even know what a phishing email is? Do people even know, like, don't click on an email address if it says like an @ instead of a to, whatever, like.
Yes. So as go ahead, I'll let you.
Yeah, so actually we've already been doing this
Yeah.
right now to start. So I forget the exact timeline, but every so many, it's like every other week or something, Kim Ramos actually will send in her tech tips across the district, which goes to everybody. There will be some of this information. So be careful of links that are very easily replicable. So don't click on something that's actually, like she shows like an example of like Amazon.com versus Arnazon.com and how easily that can look similar in text. Things to keep out for questions that might get asked. You shouldn't have your principal ever ask you for gift cards. It's things that,
Those emails that were going around the state a year ago with like...
Yeah.
So
Right. So it's a lot of those. That's actually already been starting to go out. We're trying to get people thinking already like it and to identify these
But we
things.
haven't done an actual training with them, or we have done a training. And that's good information, right? That's like the literacy piece
We have-
and getting it out.
We have not put everybody in a room. Kim has done trainings for smaller subsets, but we've never had everyone in the room get the same training at the same time, like at a PD day. It's been more. Some may happen during faculty meetings. Some. What's up?
Everyone who identified as key personnel.
Yes.
Required.
So it's anybody who we have gone through and done training for anybody who has had
A privileged.
privileged access, to information, did have to sit down and go through some of the security training. Something like you may not have seen it yet, for example, but you'll probably see them too. But I believe Joe, you were in one of those of your staff.
It was in my first 3 weeks, I was in one.
Yep. So we already are starting to roll that out to staff. Something like having this WISP will ensure that not only do we just do it, but we do it regularly and can ensure that the staff do get access to these resources and we stay on it.
Thank you.
The question that I had when I was looking at the policy is it talks a lot about employee safeguards and training for employees, et cetera. But I was thinking about all the students in the district that have, they're on our emails, they have different like devices that are provided by the district. Like was there anything that of concern in that realm of students and?
So yes, this became, it's a bit hard because we're trying to divide this amongst two things, one of which is the where's our ultimate goal, and also one of what hits us to keep cyber insurance, to be quite honest.
Yes.
So the cyber insurance part, this satisfies that. The students are something that, should, like as a best practice, we would like to explore in future, but this is what covers us for cyber insurance. The thing that the trust predominantly is aiming at protecting is the access that teachers have and any administration support staff. The students, because they have so much limited access compared to most staff, the potential harm that could happen to the district is significantly minimalized.
Yeah.
So for example, we have our elementary kids in what's called a walled garden, which means they can only send and receive emails from NKSD email addresses, or if it's Google Classroom or Canvas or Aspen, we can, and Andy can whitelist certain other domains that can be allowed to send, but somebody at yahoo.com can't just send an email to a third grade. They can send it, it's just never going to make it through. There are additional safeguards as far as SIPA, COPA, that are set up through our filters, as well as GoGuardian. So there are additional, but as far as if an email saying, I'm in a meeting, send me an Amazon card, I'll pay you back. If that email got through, that may not get picked up.
I understand better now though, thank you for explaining, because I understand that it's like this specific policy is talking about the information security, and the breach, if a teacher got breached and had lists of students with personal information, is way different than if a student got breached and didn't have, like, there wouldn't be that access. So that's the differentiation. All right, thank you for clarifying that. That makes a lot more sense in my brain.
Yeah, it's hard because this is, to be fair, information and security, those terms are so broad, for sure.
Yeah.
But it kind of intentionally is so.
We last few years we've seen, I'm not sure if this falls under this umbrella here, but we've seen increased like phony threats against schools made that, you know, require a response from us. Is this something that like would fit under that, or
No.
that's a separate area?
No, that's more the emergency response, the district emergency team.
Not to bring up a sore subject, but I believe like kind of what we're talking about just happened on the town side, and so have we talked to them at all about things that they've learned or would do differently that we might want to incorporate into procedures?
We've not gone into details yet. It's something that we would like to discuss with
it
them,
might
but
be
we wanted to also give them some time to recover
Understood.
and plan. So it is on our.
Great. It's so unfortunate that happened, but like it could be a good opportunity for us to identify some things.
Yeah,
but I
agree.
also get giving them some time to work through it as well. I appreciate that.
My one question, when you talk about the risk assessment and doing the initial one and then doing continued ones, the policy doesn't outline like how often those happen. Is there like a best practices on those? Is that?
I thought it was, so the best practice would be as close to annually as possible. I thought it actually had that in there. Maybe it's written somewhere else.
Is that an MSIAC?
The MSISAC. So part of it is MSISAC, which is the a part of the cybersecurity team for the government. They would also recommend it's roughly annually. But the thing is that this is all fluctuating. So that's the problem. Is by doing it too much to a timeline. It being too specific, it does then, by being too specific here, it limits flexibility within the protocols that may need to, unfortunately, just because of that may need to get shrunk as time goes on, for all we know. It may need to be happening.
And there'll be a new vulnerability that'll be identified. And
my recommendation, I noticed that as well, it was a little vague, and I understand that, but my recommendation would be maybe to put some specific language in, and then if the school committee ends up adopting this policy, having it be one that we look at annually. So like there's some that come up every year. So like every May it pops back up and we re-look at it to see if we need to make any tweaks. Just because like, you know, as it reads now, it says like, okay, train employees. So that if something happened in like 6 years and then I was still the school committee chair and was like, hey, like, did you do this? You all would say, oh, we did it 6 years ago, but like, it doesn't actually practically help because those employees that are there now probably didn't go through it 6 years ago. And so I would maybe do something about specifying new employees, like when they enter the district, and then maybe some language about how often, and then we can always tweak it or revise it. But I do think just leaving it open, like, doesn't really make it enforceable. Does that make sense? And we can work through that. Like, if that sounds horrible, we can talk it through. But
No, I get you. I'm just thinking.
yeah, just ponder it.
But I don't think the goal is to have the specifics laid out in the program.
That is the ultimate goal, because the thing, so that's what I'm trying to think about. I'm trying to find the balance there, because it's going to be, I mean, like, realistically, it's ongoing training that we would be doing, or even if it's a matter of sending out, you know, kind of refresher emails, just to keep people seeing it and thinking about it. As far as the actual specifics and details of when we could do and how we would do the trainings, that's something we would like to. It would make more sense to keep out of this particular piece, so that way it can adapt as technologists. We can potentially look at what we can do there, but
In Jamestown, we used Know Before for the training. You're probably familiar with it, but they helped provide training throughout the year. So we do the annual training with the staff at the beginning of the year, and then throughout the year, the company sends out all of the phishing emails. It gives a report back to us of, you know, how people are doing with being able to recognize that, and then there's very short videos that are then sent out a few times a year, very, very short, for like 3 to 5 minutes. And it really it's really knowledgeable, and teachers do well about just thinking of like the phishing scams and the spamming and other ways that people try to access your information. And it's interactive too, so like there's questions you have to ask, and it's very quick. It comes out throughout the year, and those emails and different information is coming to you throughout the year too. So that way, it's not something the school departments end up having to go, when we're going to train, when we're going to put this in place. So it might be good as we move forward with this, once this policy is approved, just to think about how we can lay out a training procedure for the district.
Hey, did you get engagement information? So like if I didn't do it, did you know I didn't do it? Were it prompt reminders?
I don't know if we were told specific names,
or
but the
percentage.
people that were opening the emails to the point where it could have caused risk to the district were then sent additional training videos from the company.
So it's adaptive.
Yeah. So it wasn't directly coming from our tech director. It was coming from the company. But she was getting a listing. I think it was more numbers of like how many staff are passing, how many staff need more training.
I have a weird logistics question for Stephanie. In the document on page 4, it references terminated employees, and that, which makes sense, will be revoked as soon as possible, etc. Is that word terminated inclusive enough for any employee that leaves the district? Like, in my mind, I hear terminated, it means like we said, thank you so much, goodbye, like not they quit or whatever.
Termination/separation.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that like it was inclusive enough to include any employee that left the district.
We kind of classify people as who resigned or retired. And terminated. So I think we want to make sure.
Yeah, so maybe we could just add some additional language there, just to. I think we understand the intent, but like just to cover all bases.
And we do work with, so when people separate from us, whether it's through retirement or resignation, we generally do work with them on as far as hey, if you still need your account open, we're shutting it off on this date, unless you're good sooner than that, and we'll shut it off sooner.
Oh, I'm sure in practice. I just was thinking for this policy, it might be better to have more broad language.
And I think that might be something that's more part of the program versus like the specifics of.
I agree though, but in the policy, we should clarify, because just to say the same thing, well, that person wasn't terminated, they resigned.
Terminated or
I
otherwise
was just saying, all I'm saying like
separated.
is terminated, comma, resigned, comma, retired, or whatever Stephanie.
Or just put like any separation.
Any
employees that separate from the
any version of that is fine. I just think terminated seemed to me too narrow.
Now, when we come back with these changes, it's a red line change, correct? Because you've seen this for the first time?
Yes.
Okay. So.
Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, I think so. Does anybody else have anything on this one? So if you want to make those revisions and then just send them over, we can put them on the next agenda. month, will that work? Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome to stay.
Yeah, feel free to stay or you can go, whatever you want to do. So now we'll go back to policy GCB with the benefits for the non-unit and supervisory personnel. We had some follow-up from the last time we discussed this. And I know, Stephanie, you and Ken put a document together. I mean, I don't know, did you want to talk before we got into it, or did you want to wait to see where the discussion led?
See where it goes.
Okay, all right, I just wanted to give you the opportunity to speak.
Thank you.
If you wanted to. So Stephanie or Ken, you want to?
Sure, I'll start and you can jump in, Stephanie. Just see if I find my notes. Too many windows open. Yes. So we went through, looked at current contracts and like the language and the sections in current contracts that we have with employees under GCB, and then compared it to what is in the GCB policy. I think one of the goals that we have that we'd like to offer to the committee is to simplify this as much as possible. So that way we have the GCB policy, but we also have templates of contracts that they can be used for employees that have contracts and employees that don't have contracts, just follow the GCB policy. So we did go through it. There are a few items in the document, Jim, that I shared with you, I put in blue. Areas that we noticed are in either the ESP contract or the teacher's contract that are not in the GCB policy or in the contracts that are being given to administrators that we believe should be in there, specifically under other compensations and leaves. So right now, within the contracts that we have or the policy, it covers the health, dental, paid vacations, paid holidays, paid sick leave, life insurance. Somewhere it talks about longevity. We kind of were questioning that piece of it. Paid personal leave, family illness. But it doesn't have anything in there about maternity, paternity leaves. That is in the other contracts, as well as noting religious holidays. And those are two items that we saw that weren't in there that we would like to make sure is either part of the GCB policy or part of the contracts that we're putting forward, because we believe that even our members, employees under this policy should have a right to maternity, paternity leave, but it's not listed. Okay. And our suggestion is to look at what was put into the teacher's contract, and then religious holidays, because it's not noted anywhere what happens on a religious holiday. Does the employee have the right to have that off, meaning as a religious leave, as do other employees in the district? And it says it on the calendars as well, but there's nothing referenced in the contracts of the GCB policy, and we've been asked of that, and we're kind of unsure of how to respond because it's not listed anywhere.
Is there language in the two union contracts around religious holidays?
So I didn't see
in the teacher contract there is.
Okay, that's where it was.
Okay.
Yeah, that was like a big, yeah.
So that's something that we want to bring up and make sure that we get that in the policy for the GCB and within the contracts for the non-unit staff. Make sure there's the right term there. And then what we did look at is within the GCB policy where we think we can make improvements to the policy, so that way there's no question of what benefits people are getting or not getting, and having to look at that each year. And when looking at it, we'd like to make the recommendation that under the benefits pieces of the contracts, it follows the NEAK contract for all GCB employees. Health, dental, vision, those benefits are, typically you're going with one plan, and whatever that plan is, that's what you're providing to the district. But I think we also need to make sure like the co-pays and what those benefits are and the cost is the same. And when there's questions that come up, if we just say we're following this, if what's agreed upon under the NEAK contract, that's what's applied to to all of the other members, that would simplify some of the language in the policy, and I know you had asked me, does that get changed? We need to look at annually. I think it just follows the contract, right? We know their contract changes every 3 years, so whatever that change is in the NENK contract, that just gets followed. You know, the GCB policy just states that it's following the NENK contract.
And then you wouldn't have to update the policy for those pieces every year.
Right, and that would cover the health, dental, vision, life insurance, paid sick leave, family illness, bereavement days, paid personal leave, maternity, paternity leave, religious holidays, tuition reimbursement. We had a question around longevity to look at that to see how would that even apply towards the other contracts? Would it apply? So that was something we wanted to have a conversation over. And then as far as salaries, we wanted to make sure that we came up with some type of a range of a minimum, maximum. We know there was a chart that's pretty outdated in the policy that none of us could interpret, but we should have some type of a minimum, maximum based on the RISA and RIASBO databases that come out annually. And that's just looking across the state, looking at the salaries and making sure that the salaries that we're offering here in North Kingstown are competitive across the state, and then having a minimum maximum dependent on experience and qualifications of the person that we're hiring in those positions. And then we also believe that the vacation days need to be separate because vacation days wouldn't be noted in the other, the NENK contract because they're 10-month employees, but we would want to note vacation days here and have that outlined within the GCB policy what those vacation days would be, as well as the state and federal holidays, and we listed that in comparison. So we believe that those two items would definitely be different than the 10-month employee contract because the other employees are 12-month or 216-day employees. I think that was. And then we want to, obviously there's a professional learning piece in there, and I'm not sure if that should be in the GCB contract, GCB policy, or just that we have a contract template that we use, allowing for professional learning for our employees, the administrative staff that are continuing to, be expected to participate in professional learning, that they're expected to join professional organizations if it's principals for RIASP, if it's the finance director for RIASBO, whatever that professional organization may be. And then the last one in there was around mileage reimbursement. And I just put the mileage reimbursement should be based on the role of the administrator or the administrative assistant. I think it's different depending on the job. Some people don't travel as much, so you would have to put in a monthly travel reimbursement. And other positions, they are on the road daily, weekly, and then that would be a stipend. There's other areas that we might have left out, but those were the key pieces that we had pulled out.
So I had a couple of questions about, thank you for going through and doing this. I know it was not easy and there were a lot of different pieces. My first question was, currently in the policy, we, in theory, are delineating the positions that are part of the policy, but they're not all on there. We discovered when we started going through this. So what are your thoughts around that section of the policy? Like reviewing that annually to make sure that all positions are covered, or referencing out to a different document, or like what's the best way to handle that?
I always want to be careful when we're writing policy that if stuff that has to be changed, we want to make sure, because then we have to go back to this, back to school committee and policy every single year. So I don't know if it's necessary to have to list all of the positions, or that there's a statement that these are the non-unit employees that don't fall under the ESP or the NENK contract.
Like if you're not in a union, this applies to you, basically.
Right. Because if you add a position, then you got to add it in. But
because something can happen during the year where if there is a new position created and then it wouldn't be in the policy. I just think we would just have to say, not within the two unions, but then I think we also may have to use the words for the policy for the quotas in the OFL. They have their own policy, so I think we would say we'd have to exclude those two. So it would be anybody not in the the teacher contract, the ESP contract, or those other policies kind of fall within this.
should there be any type of language in the policy around what happens if there is a discrepancy and which one takes preference? I mean, I know we're trying to eliminate all the discrepancies right now, but it's possible that there will be one. I know that's a question right now, like which one?
I think that's okay as long as it's not, as long as we also know that if it's an error in the contract, that we need to know that it doesn't.
Well, so
It's not going to supersede what the GCP policy is. I think we just want to be careful. I'm not.
Yeah, I think it depends on what the contract says, to be honest with you. The contract could in fact supersede, a written contract could supersede the policy depending on how it's written. So there's gonna be a significant amount, I think. The ideas are great, there'll be a significant amount of cleanup and catch up to get everybody up to speed with how that looks.
I was thinking that as well as somebody who's like negotiated some contracts recently, like there could be a world where we have the GCP policy, we have our blanket, like this is what everybody gets baseline, but then to secure really great talent to the district, like we might have made an accommodation or you get an extra, I don't know, the extra day that you negotiated in to perhaps save on salary or whatever, and that would be specific to their contract, but not in the GCP policy, so that's tricky.
Yeah, and again, if you've got something in your contract that conflicts with what's in GCB, I think a rational argument could be made your contract controls over GCB as opposed to vice versa. I think I told you guys at the last meeting, we've had a situation in another district where they had a benefit, a retirement benefit, when they signed on, the policy was changed. Employee was under the mistaken belief that they still maintain that benefit, and now there's, some significant litigation ongoing, trying to iron that out. So it is, I think the ideas are great. I just think how we effectuate it, we're gonna have to be very careful and make sure that everything lines up.
Would we have to update the contracts?
Yeah, I mean, again, depending on the term, depending on when they expire, probably bring people in and try. I think probably messaging everybody that we're just trying to clean up the policy and get everybody on the same page is probably critical, so folks know we're not, deliberately going into your contract for just because we want to. We've updated the policy. We want to make sure that the contracts all align with the policy. We're doing it for everybody. My sense is that unless someone's really negatively impacted, they should be okay with that, and we could update, do addendums or just update the contracts, and then update everything as the contracts come up for renewal.
Sorry, just a question about the list that you were talking about in there, because I'm fine with removing it, but I think policies are really important that they're really clear to people. So if somebody looks at this, I want them to know if they're in or out of it. So I don't know if it's worth there's not that many, and I can't imagine we're creating new ones all the time. And so I don't know if it's worth just leaving a list in and making sure that if a new position does get created, that's a non-unit one, it gets added, or writing it the opposite way that says this is applicable to employees who are not in the following unions or whatever. I feel like you need some sort of clarification, and whatever's easiest is what I would defer to, but I feel like I want people to not think they're in and they're not, or have any confusion there. I'd like it to be really clear, whatever's the easiest way.
I think right now there's 30-something positions, so there are quite a few that are covered under this.
Yeah, but the categories are it's principal middle school, principal high school.
No, I'm including those as part of the 30, because there were probably 15 that we discovered were not listed on the policy that actually do exist. And I noticed with some of them, the title actually changed, even though it's the same person. So my preference would be not to list them and do that. If you don't have a contract, this policy applies to you.
Yep.
A union contract?
A union contract.
Oh, yeah, I was just saying bargaining.
Yeah,
Part of a bargaining
Yeah,
unit.
member of the bargaining unit.
Yeah, so maybe just let's spell that out.
But
that would be
OFL, they're not.
Yeah, and it's where it gets
that's
weird.
that in the quotas,
That's how you
they're
end up
not,
with
I
this
know.
thing.
But I
Are
don't
those
want
the
to
only
forget
ones that you're aware of? The OFL,
OFL,
the quotas, and the
quotas, and then we
PTAs?
have the hourly bus monitors.
Yeah. So do you do the exception list, or do you do the inclusion list? But I think
So
we
what
need
did-
something.
So what do they have?
So OFL has a policy, quotas have a policy,
GC 1 and 2, right?
yeah, and then bus monitors are just hourly people.
Do those legally have to be separate? GCP 1, GCP 2, is there in our effort to try to make this simpler, could there be one GCP, could we
Absolutely.
combine those for now?
Yeah, I don't know how specific, I did notice, you know, there was some limited benefits to, depending on the position. You could put them all together for sure for conciseness, but you may end up, depending on what the varying benefits are, you may end up with just with one really long policy. If the coders get one benefit that the other GCB folks don't get, who the OFLs get part of, you have to spell all that out differently.
Where's the truancy officer fall?
They were listed on the list that came to me for the GCB.
Oh, okay, because I'm looking at it.
Stephanie's sound did not make it sound
I'm
like
looking
that.
at it now, and I don't see it. Do you see it on
It
the?
was not, it was
Oh, it's
not-
one of the missing
it's one of the
positions.
missing
Yes.
positions, yeah.
That's not a definitive, yeah, I'm trying to think, that one is always a question on where they fall. So
Yeah,
honestly,
anybody.
I've heard language that they follow a lot of the teacher contracts.
Does the truancy officer have a contract? Does she have her own contract?
No.
So I think she'd fall under GCB then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But
not
Jen
right.
just said that that's one of the missing positions
Yeah.
that I think if you do a statement, they would then fall under
I mean, you could say, if you're not a member of
NEA.
NEA, what's the next one?
NK,
ESP, a CODA person or whatever, like, this applies to you. Like, I mean, that's
Yeah.
probably the
I mean, I
cleanest way.
the truancy officer should
Yeah.
follow in this, but the research I've done in the past,
Yes.
it hasn't been clear how that person has been handled, or that position.
Because that's an hourly position.
It is an hourly position,
I don't know how.
Year round?
no.
Okay, what was the next part, Jen?
So my next question was around the benefits. So what we're saying is that the benefits are gonna be per the NENK contract. My question was, does it change with each negotiation? And if it does, how does that affect people who, cause everybody in the union, aren't there some little exceptions? Like if you've been here for this long, you keep this, and so, no.
I mean, sometimes when you negotiate a contract, you'll grandfather in something if you're to get the deal, like the contract signed. We didn't do one in this current negotiation. I think my concern with having it mirror that is like their bargaining unit, and they bargain for their members, and it's very specific, and employees that aren't in that bargaining unit aren't in it for a reason, and so I think most things work very consistently with that, but if something happened where they negotiated something and it wasn't beneficial to the non-union members, but they did it for a certain reason to get something else that was very applicable to their bargaining unit or very important, I wouldn't want the non-unit employees to be for lack of a better word, harmed by that change because they didn't have voice or whatever.
But is there any voice in this now amongst the non-unit employees, or are they just told here's your package?
I mean, there's some negotiation at their contract level.
And I mean, we're not going to offer different health packages
Yeah.
to one, to administrators that's different to other employees.
Because
That was one of the things that I thought I heard was that the union has the option for 2 different health
No,
plans.
no. The teachers have one plan, and then the ESP contract has another plan.
So there are, but that's kind of the
But you
point.
can't pick.
Right, but by default, the non-union people are given one versus the other, correct?
Well, and there are members of GCB who don't have a contract, so they are.
Right.
This is the healthcare plan
Right.
that applies to GCB.
Right.
So that plan is the teacher plan.
Yeah.
I think what I was gonna say, and I think instead of having it be an automatic, saying when a new teacher contract is negotiated, then GCB should get looked at to see if we want to make changes with it. And I think the voices, we're the conversation, anytime any employee can come and speak to the school committee about a policy, XYZ, I just think the automatic piece ties you in a way where I would go more with the language of the following things could be looked at if it was negotiated. It could be overly cautious though, but
The only thing I think is then you would have to work with Blue Cross to, if they changed their co-shares and we didn't want to do that, then you would be having 3 plans. What would the cost of that? You just have to look at that.
Yeah, I'm saying like you would review it and you'd say, oh, like we don't want to have 3 plans, we should update GCB. But like if it was something that was like, I can't think of like, what would be like an opposite? I was trying to think of one that like they might want to negotiate that then would negative, like, you know, like that wouldn't be a benefit.
For the HSA contributions.
Yeah, it could be something.
I also wonder, there's a higher cost associated with the teacher's healthcare plan, and there are some lower paid members of GCB. If even given GCB members the choice of either the teacher's healthcare or the ESP healthcare, might give them an option or choice.
Yeah, we've heard from employees about
Yeah.
that. What part of the policy are we like talking about right now? Because I know we're talking like kind of generally, but what's the actual?
What does a GCB employee under this current policy get for health coverage?
Teachers.
So you're really just codifying what happens.
Yep.
But even in the policy, it like delineates between date of hire and how those contributions are, like in the current policy. Effective July 1, this is happening. Effective 2010, this is happening.
And it's a new person, like, yeah.
How, when the health insurance is fixed, is it fixed for like a 1-year period, 2-year period, 3-year period?
Usually 1 year. Right?
Yeah, with the term of contract, right?
Yeah.
Depending, you would be able to change the benefits mid-tier, so.
Yeah, you would. Usually, I think the trust, every year we look at the rates.
The rates would change, but not
But
the
like-
actual package that's given.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
exactly.
So like the policy wouldn't change until you're negotiating a new contract.
Right.
Then you would look at it.
So I mean, maybe it is something that gets updated every time. I like that. Because the other thing too, like Erin said, like if you're not in a union, you're either reaping the benefits of the union or you're not. And if you're automatically tied to the union contract, then the non-unit personnel are not saying that it's good or bad, but it's just automatically tied to the union negotiation.
Yeah, so like, you know, and again, I want to benefit all employees in districts, like everyone's extremely valuable, but if the teachers decided that NEA, NK folks decided, you know, this year we're going to take a smaller percentile because we're really focused on this language thing, like that, in theory, like negatively affects the non-union members because they got a benefit or they got something that like they wanted in the contract language, but like if they had decided they wanted the percentage, then that would affect the non-unit salaries. You know, like, so it's like thinking about, but like they wouldn't reap the benefit that they got in the contract.
Right.
So it's just like, it's tricky. Like I get why they should be aligned in some way, but I think you want to make sure you're protecting like both sides.
You know, can you put something like for the peer, I mean, it does require updating this, but I mean, looking at this policy on a semi-regular basis is a bad idea. Can you say something in the policy like for the time period X July, this is what the benefits are?
You can, but again, you want to be cautious of, because your time isn't always going to line up. Let's say you have a 3-year teacher's contract, but I was hired on a 3-year contract 1 year before that contract was negotiated, so they're not always going to align at all. So that's where the difficulty there comes in.
I'm seeing more for the non-contract people.
My recommendation is that you put what the benefits are in a policy, and then if it gets updated, if a contract gets updated, and especially any NKs, and you think that it needs to be adjusted, you adjust it. Like I think just saying reference that one isn't a good practice, because then if there's things in that contract that aren't like clear, like you might think that it counts for you, but it really only counts for members. You know, like I think the clearer you can be for your employees, like the better. Even though I hate like duplication, like it's not the same. Like you're not in that union. I don't know.
Can I ask a question? It's just me being new. Why do, and I think I know the answer, but I'm just going to ask, why do we have this policy if there are contracts being ran?
Because there's
And
not
then-
contracts.
Not
And
everybody
then
has a
why
contract.
do we have some employees that don't have contracts?
Because they're not like administrator level positions is my guess.
that's the concern. I think that we've talked about this before, when I totally understand the policy and why you would go with that, and if that's not a North Kingston thing, I think, honestly, Dr. Duva, every committee that I represent that has something like this has that issue. Some people come in on a contract, some people don't have a contract, some people have a one-page
So then
contract.
should this just be for employees that
Non-contracted
don't have
employees.
a contract?
I mean, that is another,
Because then we won't have confusion over a contract that employee A has with this, and maybe this is just for those employees that don't have a contract.
and that's where you started with the template
But the
contracts.
employees that do have a contract, that's what they follow.
Yeah.
And if we have a template contract, then all your people that are getting a contract have the same contracts with the same benefits.
See, to your point, there's duplication, but
And
if
then,
it's clear, I
and
have
then
my
that would,
contract in
that
my
would
hand.
then take care of like some of these conversations
Well,
we're having, is just, this policy is only for those employees that don't have a contract. And then the non-unit staff, if we look at who has contracts and who doesn't, those that do have contracts, you follow their contract.
Yeah, because, I mean, I would assume just even going down this list, obviously your principals have contracts, your assistant principals have contracts, and so
Yeah,
it's
so
somewhat duplicative in that regard anyway, so if you just limited this to just simply non-contract employees, and maybe
Non-contracted
spell that out a little
employees.
better.
Mhm.
Even if the benefits that are in my contract are the exact same thing that are in the benefits of GCB, to Dr. Earl's point, it's spelled out. And I know in my hand what I've got, and I know they don't have a contract, so I can go to GCB.
My recommendation would be, instead of having a template contract, like having the baseline be this policy, and so say you were going to hire a new principal, like whatever GCB is at that time with the outline of the benefits is what you would put in that contract as like the start. Instead of having like 3 different documents, like that makes me nervous of having like a template and this and then individual contracts.
Like the policy is the template.
Well, and I mean templates, I mean you could still have a template, but like where, like what the like baseline like benefits are and different things, I feel like should be an approved something, or the template could be an addendum to it or something.
But
Like,
then,
this is what you have unless you negotiate something different.
but then is everybody gonna negotiate their own contracts?
So, I mean, what I've seen with the template contracts is they're template, but they're also tiered. A lot of times it's by days. If I'm a 260-day employee, I get X amount of sick days, X amount of vacation days. If I'm a 240-day employee, I get, however it is, but the terms are generally the same. The language is the same. You may see a difference, I think, as Dr. Dewey said, in the mileage reimbursement, because this particular position drives every day, so it's a monthly stipend. That's usually, but I think the larger point is that, in all honesty, all of the language, the template should really line up with GCB language-wise. You may have just tweaks to certain benefits. I wouldn't do it on an individual, I wouldn't suggest you do it on an individual basis. I'd suggest you do it on a, like I said, most do it on a date, how many days the position works. If all your principals work 260, then this is what all the 260 employees get.
Right, and then that way it's the same for that position.
But the contracts don't mention some of these things in.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I said earlier, it's
Or
gonna
just
take
a
a little,
cleanup.
it's gonna take some cleaning up, yep.
Yes.
And you may have to grandfather some people, or at least let them live through the term of their contract, obviously. If what you're looking at is going to, negatively impact the benefits they get, they may end up keeping those benefits. But with the understanding, when that contract re-ups, you're now going into this template format. And I think, as Dr. Earl also pointed out, it's not uncommon to see an addendum to those templates, a special circumstance, a hard-to-find position, a hardship position that the committee agrees to, or the superintendent agrees to give an additional benefit to an employee for a limited period of time or something.
So are we saying that we want to propose that policy only cover people without a contract?
That's what I was proposing, but I think what Andrew was also saying, right, and what Dr. Earl was saying is looking at some of the pieces on here, like
That forms
how
the basis
benefits
for the contract.
is the template.
Yeah, like, so I'm just thinking like practically, right? Like, so when we went to write like some of the contracts, like you're like staring at it and you're like, what do I put in here, right? Like, and as leadership changes different things, I feel like it's important to have like some of it outlined. And so, I mean, I think whatever we do, I just want to make sure that we don't have like multiple places and multiple sources so that we're creating additional conflicts. So I don't know if it necessarily, it might be the same thing, like it's non-unit administrative and supervisory personnel, it outlines it, but then some sort of language of basically saying like, if your contract differs from this, like your contract is like the guiding document. Like, if that makes sense?
Okay, I mean,
And our attempt would be, once we solidify this, to update the ones that we currently have, and then going forward, we could go from there, but I think, like, having it, like, in here is still important. But we definitely want to align it, so if there's things like I know Dr. Duva and Stephanie went through, and, like, we need to update some of these things, you know, like the parental leave stuff, because some of it is parental leave considered a fringe benefit or no?
Well, it depends on if it's a statutory benefit, unless you go beyond that, so.
Yep. I was just thinking, like, the language in this right now says that, all fringe benefits contained in the teacher's contract and in effect between the school committee and the teachers association shall provide all I'm on page 4. It's under benefits, like right under the header. And this is specifically talking about health and dental. It's under that header. But it says like that piece about it. So I wasn't sure like where something like the paternity leave.
Yeah, I mean, as I read this without a separate.
If we have to add it separately.
Yeah, my take would be that's only the
Right,
right.
yeah.
Yeah, I think you'd get whatever your statutory Rhode Island and FMLA benefit would be.
Yeah.
But if the teachers now have that additional benefit, these folks wouldn't have that as this is written.
Yep. Yeah, that was my question.
Yep.
If it was like overarching under fringe, but it's not. Is this the same benefit for tuition reimbursement as?
Teacher contract?
Yeah,
I think it's different.
yeah, I think it is too.
Different?
So we touched briefly on length of work, because I know that was something else, like in this policy somewhere, it says that people are able to negotiate their individual days of work, but there's some question as to whether that's actually happening. So how would the days of work for each?
It's the first thing under general. So it says all non-unit personnel's work year shall be determined on an individual basis.
That's a fun one.
So,
Way to start off.
so the contracts spell it out, but then there's also this clause, so that's a discrepancy right there.
So right, if you don't have a contract, as Dr. Rich just pointed out, that's interesting.
Right.
It doesn't even say how.
Nope.
No.
The supervisor says 365.
So I think that's something that needs to be
Clarified.
clarified.
The guys in the audience just got very nervous at that.
And then would we be putting those salary ranges attached to this contract? Where would those salary ranges live?
Well,
So those could change every year, right? Because every year they're updated through RISA and RISA. So I think as long as we reference we're using
because that limits our.
data from RISA and RISA, that's what we're going to use.
There's 2 schools of thought.
Well, I'm sure there is.
Yeah. So
Sorry, we're grumbling about what negotiations, like where it lands in negotiation.
right, because of the change in the building based and the principals recommending the superintendent hiring personnel, some districts have gone with a metric of to basically a directive to the superintendent. If you hire a principal, you can hire, that's your discretion, and you can hire them between X and Y. Some districts have done that. Other districts have not done that and maintained their statutory right to, you can tell us who your principal is going to be, but we are the body that enters into a contract. You can make a recommendation on salary, but we'll be the final arbiter, so to speak. So that's really a decision of the school committee. I've seen it go both ways. And I think what Dr. Earl and I were just talking about over here, sometimes if you put that range it may limit your ability to bring in somebody above that. I mean, you can always have controlling language or language that allows you to go higher or lower, but those are the two schools of thought. I've seen it done both ways.
I was saying too, like with the ability to negotiate with a candidate, like I don't know if you want that public. Like there's some things that you're allowed to have not public, and that would be one that I would say you might want to like use because it's part of the like negotiation kind of concept. So I think it's important to have, and we can talk through like what makes most sense, but I don't know if it's in the GCB policy.
No, that's fine, because right now the policy says that base salary paid to non-union personnel will be determined on the base amount paid to teachers. So there is language in there around salary, which is a conflict with what's actually happening. So that at a minimum needs to.
Does that just mean that you can't go lower than the lowest step teacher? That's how I interpret that interesting sentence.
Yeah, but I do think people like to know a range when they apply to a position. I think if we don't post that.
We don't do.
We don't, but I do think people.
Oh, it's definitely best practice to do it.
But with this too, like if you have the base salary and you're basing it on teacher's hours versus administrator's hours versus 12-month hours, like the base salary hourly rate is very different. So it doesn't even really clearly say.
It adds again, because of the way the statute was changed in 18, now, before the school committee always had that authority, now the superintendent has it, so it really just changes I don't want to say the level of bureaucracy, but the level of involvement, quite frankly. So if you go with the range, then Dr. Duba comes to you at a meeting and says, I hired Andrew Henius as the assistant principal, and his salary will be X. And as long as it's within that range, that there's no discussion, nothing needed to be taking place. If you go with the latter, Dr. Duba comes to you and says, I've hired, or I've appointed Andrew Henius as the, assistant principal, and I'm recommending a salary of X, and then you folks would decide whether you want to give that salary or not. Really, that depends on the committee.
Going back to what the sentence that Jen is referring to, I'm trying to figure out why they would have written it like that. It's on page 6 at the top. It says a base salary paid to a non-unit personnel will be determined on the base amount paid to the teachers in the NEA contract. And then there's some longevity language. Why would they write that in? You ever seen that?
No, I have not. Nope. And I don't know. I honestly.
It's weird, right?
Much as I don't like to say this,
But I
publicly,
always
don't know what it means.
look at though, whenever I'm looking at something that people have written in the past that like I wasn't privy to the conversation, is like it exists for a reason. You know, like even if we now think it's weird, like I always try to figure out in my brain like why would they write that in? What is
refer
that?
to the base amount without any additional stipends based on master's degree or doctorate or CAGs or something. But again, what's that base? How are you determining that?
You could be that.
Hire
So someone hired less than a step 1 teacher. Another potential, which doesn't make much sense.
I think that some districts too, like they took like the step 10 amount, and then based on the position, they took a percentage of that and either added or subtracted.
And I always thought that's in some weird way what this salary range was.
Right.
I'm not sure what the basis is, but I wonder if that's, that may actually, something like that may be the base amount, so
like
perhaps that's a percentage of the base amount when you look at that salary range.
Figuring out the weird thing. So if we take the base and then it's base times
and then
whatever.
and then high school
maybe.
principal, the low would be 1.37% of that. I don't really know.
The table makes sense.
Makes as much sense as anything else.
We're gonna figure it
So
out
together
someday.
they're
It's like a
kind of-
puzzle.
Yeah.
that's what I think that they do.
I think sometimes they put it in too because as teacher salaries increase, your administrator salaries will automatically increase based on that salary scale, so you wouldn't have to like renegotiate your salary. It would just go up as your teacher's salaries increase.
Yeah, that part definitely makes sense to me, that like, for salary compression, like it would be adjusted, but that one sentence, I don't know, I can't.
When I was still an assistant principal, I'd asked about that,
Yeah.
and I was told a couple things. One, it's never been followed.
Tell us more, the historian.
2, it was based off of a top step teacher with X amount of, with a master's degree and X amount of seniority. But it was then followed up with, it's never been fully implemented.
But see, if you had that baseline,
Spelled
then
out.
this salary range may make sense. So if you pick, let's pick a hypothetical position that makes $100,000. then the salary range for the benefits coordinator would be $43,000 to $53,000. That's,
I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's what it is, but this hasn't been updated.
yeah, and more importantly, we don't have the base.
We don't know what the base
is.
So,
Well, if you take a top step teacher, it makes sense. When you take a top step teacher.
But it doesn't
Doesn't
say
say that.
top
It
step.
doesn't say it,
It doesn't,
right,
but,
yeah.
but when you're hiring, you would expect that, especially if you're hiring administrators, they're being paid more than your top step teacher. But what if you're not hiring an administrator?
Mhm.
What are you basing that off of?
So that kind of ties into my next question on like,
This
so
is like
the salary, we're still trying to figure out what that's based on, but then what about like merit pay, evaluation steps? How does that all like fit into here? Is that in the contract, is it here, like?
I mean, merit pay is something for you folks to discuss, and I know Dr. Pilata had been
Yeah.
pretty vocal about that.
It's in this policy though.
Yeah,
That's
100%, yep.
And in this and from my limited recollection, this is off of we have to confirm this statement. I don't recall language about longevity in some of the contracts that we've seen recently, like specifically called out.
Yes, I would agree with that.
I don't think in most
Yes.
administration contracts,
No.
I would say no.
I don't think that. I think it's just in here, which this is the document, of course, but I don't think it's also in that contract.
You may see some retirement benefits based on longevity. You know, if you have with 10 years of the district, you can cash in so many sick days. I'm not sure on yours, but I'd have to
There
double
were
check.
some contracts with that clause grandfathered in.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, having been hired in 2012, just after this, that was a statement to end the benefit for all new hires as of that date, and anybody who was a member of GCB prior to whatever, I saw the date somewhere in here.
Yeah,
That benefit applied to them.
like 2010 or whatever.
Yeah, I think it was July 1, 2010. So any GCB employees who were GCB employees as of July 1, 2010 got that benefit, but anyone hired after that didn't get that benefit. And there was another one with healthcare at some point that had a end date, but that got changed probably during the 2513 revision. Because there were a couple of those July 1. So July 1, 2010 was a big year that there were a number of those grandfathering in.
The healthcare was the percentage contribution.
Correct.
But the longevity, it might be something that would entice people to stay longer, to have some continuity.
I'd say especially after this last year. A lot of resignations and different positions that we have here at this level.
So, just to clarify what I'm reading though, so in an effort to maintain long service, 5 years of service in the NKSD, $1,000, is that like a one-time payment? Or is it an extra $1,000 a year?
It's a year.
Yeah.
So like, are you asking what the teachers get, or what was in the
No,
notes?
what's in this?
On this,
Yeah,
on
no,
So
page 6.
you get it yearly.
you get 1,000, if they've been 5 years in the district, either non-unit or some combination of that bargaining unit, they get $1,000.
Because I think
But that's only people hired before that.
July 1, I think there's one person.
So
Yeah.
there were like 3, I think,
Sorry, that wasn't funny.
there might be 2 left.
2, okay.
But it's basically not being offered to anybody new.
Correct.
Yep. Even,
But yet it's still listed in here, which is weird.
yeah, but it has to be because
Because
there's
there's
still.
the
Because
people who
people
had
still-
it before, yeah.
That language isn't, if, like, that's just not clear. Like, I think it's not clear that it's not a one-time bonus, but like on top of it, being added to their base salary. So, you know, I don't know if we need to change it, because it would actually be, could you actually confirm that there's only one? Not right now,
Yeah,
but like,
I mean, I
like
know
it'd be interesting to
Steve-
see how
Steve
many.
was one, and he retired, and
I just don't want to say the name.
No,
I
no,
know,
no,
I know,
no, 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 no,
but
no,
yeah.
that's nothing, but it would be interesting to see if we still need this in as we're revising it, like if they've all.
There is still
Yeah,
definitely
there's
one.
definitely still
Alright.
somebody. There's definitely still somebody.
Then I would recommend that we change the language. To at least not change the thing, but like I just think it should say,
That
like,
it's not like.
after 5, like, no, because
Are they contract employee?
it's not just a one-time
Yeah.
thing. But maybe
Yeah.
That's the way I read it.
The one
It's a
I'm thinking of
one-time
is,
thing.
yes.
Yeah.
So
I
maybe
don't know,
deal
we
with
could be
that
thinking
way.
of different people, but.
Yeah.
Oh, well, they would just say they think anyway without identifying the
So-
person, that may be a person who actually has a contract, so
So
you could just take this out of
They
GCB
do
and
have
put
a
that into their
contract, I think,
contract.
this came up in the last meeting.
The person who retired had it and didn't have a contract.
Right, but I think what we're saying is if you want to, if you're in such a position that you can amend, it's only one person, you can amend their contract and then just eliminate it from GCB, because you don't need it in GCB because it doesn't exist anymore. Unless you want to put it back
Unless
in
you
to
wanna put it
retain
back
people
in.
or something
Well, and
like
that's what we
that.
were saying, like
Yep,
for
understood.
retention, it
Understood.
might be wise to put this back in. It's,
So then does that mean, just playing devil's advocate here, like you put it back in today, does it apply to all the people that have been hired between 2010 and now?
I think it would be
If
all
you-
of the.
Yeah, if you put it in the
It'd be
policy
whoever's
that
under
way,
this policy.
yeah, yeah, so you would
I mean, it
automatically
would be
retroactively.
anyone that's, well,
Well, you
wouldn't,
wouldn't
no,
retro
they
it.
wouldn't get
Yeah.
retroactive
Yeah,
pay,
but
we're
you'd have
just
to
saying,
say that,
moving
yeah.
forward,
Yeah,
right?
moving
So,
forward, yeah.
once this is revised, let's say this does get revised, this gets changed, moving forward, next
Yeah.
fiscal year.
You
those
just have to think
applies-
about.
Yeah,
What was that?
everybody who's been here for more than 5 years would then be eligible for this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I think we can definitely, well, and then you'd have to think, so since it's 2010, like, you could have people who technically, like, get the 5-year and the 10, like, it would be, like, you have to think about
Right.
what that might look like.
But you wouldn't do
No.
it retroactive.
Right, wouldn't be retroactive. just be
No,
where
but
we're
like,
at.
okay, so if
So you'd have people that potentially, well, you'd have people at 10 years.
Yeah.
And then in another few years, some that might be at 15, depending on they get hired,
Yeah.
if they get hired.
what I'm saying is it would have compounded for them though, so like, it's,
If we
just have
look
to be
at
really
the
clear.
majority of
Yeah.
people that are under this, I can't say
Yeah.
majority, a good percentage are new.
Yeah.
So
Well,
we
know
start,
that.
I know, when I it's a lot of new
What
people.
that wrinkle is.
1 year longevity.
So I think so I guess what Jen just trying to be productive on this policy, like what would be the next step in that piece? Like, do we want the administration to come back at the next meeting and talk about that concept?
The longevity
Yeah,
concept, yeah.
Because like we don't currently have it,
Right.
and I think something I would recommend is, thinking about the parallels with the teachers, and the teacher contract, because I know there's longevity built into that, and so I always think about like trying to align the non-unit and the units, and thinking about what that looks like, because I do believe that there is some, like there's with the steps and stuff, obviously.
And I think we should also look at the financial impact on this,
Yeah,
right?
of course.
Because this is something that's financial, so let's, like we're saying, like this would be a nice incentive for our employees. But let's look at what the financial impact would be on this over the next 5 to 10 years.
And one thing I would wonder from a language or wording standpoint is how you define longevity. So if I was a teacher, a lot of teachers, or some teachers become administrators. So if I was a teacher for 20 years and then became an administrator, would I qualify under a GCB longevity?
I would say no, because you just switched your
I would-
contract.
I would agree with you, but
You just have to be clear about that.
exactly. That
It's
was
not
what I
district
wanted.
service, it's non-unit district, it's non-unit years. Is that what you're saying? Mike?
Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying.
But that's different than what's in here.
Right.
Yeah, most certainly is.
Is it okay?
The other thing is I asked Andrew to look and see, kind of how other districts are handling that. I'm curious to see if, just to keep us competitive within the state. Cause the other thing I'm thinking about is like, okay, like if I'm looking at leaving, like, and going to a different job or whatever, like, is $1,000 like, oh, I've hit 5 years, like $1,000, like it's nice and it's very good, but like, is that gonna actually help?
And I
retain?
want to take a step back at what I just said, because I'm just rereading this. I think we want to be careful at how we do that, because I think what I just said was, well, no, you're switching to a different contract, different role. We also don't want to put something in here that then
Prevents
turn
Somebody would.
someone from going in, right? So for example, you have a teacher that's been in for 20 years and they're going into this contract. I know it's only one item, but then if it says, okay, well, your longevity needs to start over, well, that means we're discrediting the 20 years of service they have. So I take back what I said, and I think if we are putting in, it should count the years of service, because otherwise we're discrediting the amount of time in the school.
Right, and a lot of teachers become principals.
And they might then turn away, like, well,
Go on.
you don't want to credit fine on, I know it's only one item, but
No,
it's.
And I think the other benefit might be is if you start getting groups, I'll choose principals because there's a number of them. If you've got principals whose salaries are closely clustered, you are honoring someone who's been here for 5 years or 10 years or longer, because a lot of times those salaries do start to get kind of.
Yeah, that's something I noticed too, Mike, when we were going through them, is that, and this is something that I think, Ken's brought up too, is like you hire a brand new principal, right? And you have the certain amount that you hire a new principal at, but like you're saying, but then there's folks here that bring like a lot of expertise and stuff because they've been here 5, 10, 15 years and they're maybe at the same salary as that new person you just brought in, which might be totally fair and just, but might not be based on criteria and things. And so thinking about how to handle that, and it could be something like longevity, or it could be something when that the superintendent can make recommendations to the school committee to try to adjust for that. We just hired a new whatever at this rate. These other 2 folks have been here for 5, 10 years. We'd like to adjust their salary. So it could be done in a different way too, but it's definitely, I think, something to consider in making sure that the folks that are here and really dedicate their time to the district feel valued.
So the last time we talked about this, we also talked about that there is an employee handbook out there somewhere. And so my other question was, how does that then tie into this policy modifications that we're making? Because it spelled out a lot of the same stuff in here.
I need to look through the employee handbook
And I think
to
that's
see if that would.
pretty general because it applies to all employees, barring the unit and
I want to say too, I thought when I was given it when I was hired, it was a lot of policies. It was mostly policies of what was in the employee handbook.
acknowledgement of policies.
Yeah, the one that I saw was much more detailed.
So and then schools may have their own handbooks,
Yeah.
like
The
staff
high school,
handbooks.
I think, has that.
Employee handbook?
I think so.
I think they may call it a staff handbook.
Staff handbook.
I'm gonna look up. I'm gonna send you an email about it.
So we have some more modifications then to go back and make on this, I think, is what I'm hearing, yes?
Yes.
Are you clear on what needs to be looked at?
Yes.
And then we have some things, based on the feedback from the administration to put in our, we can go in and add some, the things that, Dr. Duva pointed out, we go in and type some things in before our next meeting too.
Yep. When we talked the last time, we did talk briefly about the code of PTA and the OFL. Am I hearing that we want to keep it separate? Those policies separate? And just exclude those from this?
I would keep them separate.
I would exclude them from this. I mean, I don't know if they all need their own policy, but I don't think.
I guess the first thing that I think we should do is there's obviously different things, there's some difference, but how much of it is duplicate and how much of it is different? You know what I mean?
A good chunk of it says refer back to this policy.
Yeah.
Which is good, and it looks to me like the code and the PTA kind of outline the rules around how those are hired and what they have some, different appointment and,
What's a standard work day for a non-unit? Hour-wise?
Like a class, 8 to 4.
How many hours is that?
Or 8 hours, I'd say, because we do
Well,
have some 7 to 3.
It's an 8-hour day with 1 hour for lunch.
Yeah, so 7 working hours. And so Coda's 6.5.
right.
So are these more, is
Code
it almost
is
like you have a
school
12-month GCB and a 10-month GCB? Because I think the code is the PTs, those folks, truancy, they all sound to me like we're talking about 10-month. I wonder if the initial intent was to have a 12-month GCB and a 10-month GCB. Or if that's another idea of how to look at it.
Or do Codas and PTAs have contracts? Get contracts?
They do.
Yeah.
The quotas, no. Not that I've seen.
No, I'm just curious.
Yeah, and OFL does not.
What else is different? Just the,
Between
so the hours are different?
vacation's different.
Why?
I don't know
Yeah,
why, but I
I
just
wonder
know-
why.
The work
Well, they only
schedule is
work
different
10
for
months.
yeah.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't
What your
we
point
give
was
our coder, the coders and the PTAs a contract? I'm just, when I look at where it says even appointment term, it says coders and PTs shall be appointed for the school year. Appointment for the subsequent school year shall be provided to coders and PTs at the end of the preceding school year. What if they're hired mid-year? Like, just wondering why we wouldn't take what this is, put it into a contract and say, you know, here's a one-year contract, here's a 2-year contract. I think this needs to be a contract, not a policy.
I agree.
And PTAs.
I would think it'd be much more attractive for the employee coming in too.
And to hire them,
Yeah,
right,
exactly.
right. And you can take similar language from here, but at least it's a contract
It's a
that they're
contract and
getting
it takes it right out of
either
it.
year to year or
Yep.
every 2 years. We know they're not the same as certified teachers, they don't bring, they have a certificate from the Department of Health, not RIDE.
Andrew, could you check and see if there, if, again, I always try to think of like, why would this exist? Like, if other districts
I will double check.
had this pulled out too, like, it seems,
Well, I think some of these positions and maybe other contracts are part of union contracts. Coders, I'm not sure.
Well, they wouldn't, if they're part of the union
Be like
contract, they
this,
wouldn't, we
right?
wouldn't be able to
Right,
have
but
it.
see, I'm
They're
saying
not,
in other
they're not
districts.
part of
Oh,
like a
yeah, that could
teachers
look-
union.
I wonder
They're not
if in
considered
other
teacher.
worlds, if they're in a union. So like, for example, like
Could
at
be like
URI, like
ESP
I have a
union or
nurses
something.
union, right? Like they would be, like at URI, they would be in their own, like, or something. Cause there's definitely some specific things in here, but again, I think they're contract language things, but again, like we have other employees that have this situation too, but like the license part, right? Like that's a requirement of their job, is that they're licensed as a physical therapist, et cetera.
How is their salary defined? If they're GCB and what?
Same thing about paid to teachers, except this one just spelled out step 10 of the collective bargaining agreement for the school year question.
Got it.
And then it talks about adding, subtracting longevity and masters and these things.
Yeah, this one's a little clearer, although it says like collective bargaining agreement, but it doesn't refer to which one. Which would be, since we have multiple.
Yeah, and then OFL is just completely different in terms of work hours and work schedules and.
In OFL, that's a 12-month position, correct? Did they do some stuff over the summer?
I mean, they're kind of hourly employees.
And there's different subsets of it.
Right.
There's the group that works in the schools, but then there's also the office side of them. So that's a.
Yeah, I mean, and here it's talking about compensation based on the OFL salaries from 2014. Like, that's interesting.
So is the next step for GCB 1 to have the administration take a look and see, like kind of like consider the concept of sunsetting this policy and moving it to a contract language?
For GCB 1, yeah, I think so. Converting any employees currently to a contract and then getting rid of this one.
Andrew's also gonna look at other districts to see, yeah.
What about the sick bank policy? When we talked about that before, it needed to be looked at. Is that still, we want to get through GCB first and then take a look at the sick bank one?
Were there concerns with the sick bank?
I
and how
think it was
written,
just a
or-
question that it hadn't been updated since like 2013. And so there was some question as to whether it accurately reflected what's happening.
Do you have a North Kingston Administrative Association?
No.
I think so.
There was one, when I first started as an assistant principal, there was one.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that stood out the last
Yep.
time, right?
So who,
So who reviews the request and approves the request?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Who reviews and approves the request for sick pay
For
under GCB?
on GCB, well, there's supposed to be a committee. Since I've been here, nobody has requested, that I know of, has requested time. And I know that in the last couple of years, people have not been approached to participate. So it definitely needs to be.
Oh, okay. So I think what I would probably do is, from your all's lens, like, imagine a world to, like if somebody said tomorrow, like, hey, we would like to utilize this, like, what would you all do, and then what, like, it doesn't align with this or does it not align with this, like, does that make sense? And then also, you know, I think it's important to, it says emergency sick bank leave is voluntary. They can, it says like put into it, but then only those who put in can take out of it. And so I think it's important to be soliciting the employees, like,
To see if they want to.
yeah, because if not, then like they can't
Right.
access it. And so, you know, I think that
Should be a letter that goes out at the start of every.
Right, it's
Fiscal year.
well, it's supposed to be here for 1 year, and then you can participate, and you give 3 days, and then after that, you give it 1 day for up to 10 years.
I don't even see the 1 year thing in this policy.
It's in the first sentence, beginning their second year of
Oh.
consecutive unbroken service.
But the other option
Yeah.
too is, do we want a sick bank? Would people rather contribute to TDI?
I think that's an option we put out there. We show them what the benefits are of each.
Are they eligible to do TDI?
Well, the ESP union,
Yeah, but I don't,
TDI,
but NEA, NK, probably just not.
no, because they have a sick bank.
But this
This
is
not
non-unit
for them,
personnel,
right?
though.
Yeah, this is non-unit people.
This is just non-unit personnel.
Right,
They don't
Yeah.
pay into TDI.
so we don't pay into TDI, but, I mean, I think we
Could you?
could.
You have to check.
Is there a sick bank now that's just not available?
There is a sick bank.
There are days in it.
It is, yep.
I mean, TDI, we should definitely explore that as well, but I think that this is a nice thing for employees that might need it, and I think it's a nice thing that your colleagues can do to, you know, support others. So I'm in favor of keeping a sick bank. You know, I know that's not what the conversation is, but I think as the policy's written, it makes sense to me. And other than that issue at the bottom about who should be on the committee, like I didn't see any concerns regarding this on why we would change it at this point. You know, obviously if you all wanna look at it and
I think
propose
there
other
just has
things,
to
we
be some
could.
guidelines, like there is in the teacher contract
Yeah.
about
What it can be used
what
for.
it's used for.
Yep.
And I think we'd have to get a committee together. We'd have to have, has to state who would be on it.
And is there an actual application still? Like if somebody wanted to use it?
I haven't,
Right.
so I haven't seen one. There is a form that you should, when you can contribute, you should sign it and fill it out, that whether you want to contribute or you deny, and that should be kept. But I haven't seen, since I've been here, I haven't seen anybody ask for time. But I think in the past, people have used it.
I also wonder, like if it's not an easily accessible thing to find, then it might deter people from.
Right.
And this is like an active policy, so we wanna like align with what we're doing right now, but then also we could make edits to it, so we should find that form. Ken, what are your thoughts on sick
I would
bank?
say if
Or,
we're going to keep this policy, let's make the changes that need to be made so that way it's equal to what we're doing. So we need to define what qualifies for use of sick bank. We need to define who the committee is going to be, because currently this number 14 does not. There's no North Kingstown Administrative Association.
My recommendation is we very quickly update it to be accurate. And then long-term, if HR and the new superintendent and the directors wanna look at it and propose something different, they could do that, but I don't like having a messy policy that it directly affects employees, so my recommendation would be like, make the updates that we need to right now, and then we can talk about the philosophy and the concept long-term, but I would try to make a couple of these quick ones, like, before this, like, at our, not the next school committee meeting, but like when we possibly could. And then obviously, inclusive language, like there's a lot of misers, but we know we do that automatically.
So I think that once we have those nailed down, then the others that are listed on here, deferred compensation, family, medical leave, and personnel hiring, will pretty easily fall into place because they kind of just borrow from the other policies. So I think if we just focus on getting those cleaned up first, we can tackle the rest of it, because we have a whole policy here for personnel hiring, which kind of is in conflict.
So are you saying we'll table those other ones?
Yeah, we'll table them, yeah, because like we have a policy, GCF2, which is the personnel hiring policy, and some of the statements that are in here kind of don't jive with
It would be,
GCF.
because that policy
Does it
there is a
conflict with
statutory
the-
change,
yeah.
and it's probably never updated in
Yes,
the earlier
exactly,
policy.
yeah, it hasn't been updated since 2019.
And I'll check that, I saw your email, let me check on the Family Medical Leave
Okay.
Act, because I don't know if there's been actually amendments, but I know there's been interpretation changes. And the Rhode Island Parental Leave Act did have a change that took effect this year, I'm
Okay,
not
yeah,
sure
so
what
we
it was.
wanna update
So
that
I'll
also.
go through that if you don't mind.
So could we, is it appropriate to ask Andrew to like redline those ones to get them at least to like better, like
Yes,
the
I
state?
had actually
Yeah.
already asked him to do that.
Yeah, but I'm saying for our next look at
Yes,
it, like we
yep.
could look at it with those and then see if there's any additional things that we might wanna change. Like I don't wanna go through it and mark it up and then have it be things that already need to
Yes,
change.
yep.
Okay.
So we'll do that for those two. And Jade. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
So sorry, just for GCF, what was your oh, you're right, that's the same thing that we need to go through and look at the new statute that changed, right?
Right, and also like this refers back to, compensation and, how it's determined, which is kind of not in alignment with GCP.
Yeah,
So-
this is, the GCF is sort of that second option that I was telling you guys about, where the superintendent has the authority with the building principal
Yeah.
to appoint, but the school committee retains the right to hire at a, to enter into a contract at a particular salary. If you were interested in going into that salary range concept, my suggestion is that would be probably better suited for this
Here,
particular
okay,
policy,
yeah.
yep, if that's where you wanna go.
Why is this separate?
Because this happened
I
afterwards.
know they did it
Yeah,
afterwards, but
and
why didn't they just
I-
amend the policy instead of creating a new policy?
No idea.
I would like to fold this one in.
Yeah.
It just, this one does not, like CODA might need to be separate, it may be, I don't even think so, but this one, I feel like should be part of, like, GCB,
Which one?
GCF.
GCF,
Which is,
that's just personnel, so it's basically
Okay.
the one that mirrors the law that says the superintendent.
Although this
the
is-
building
nope,
principal,
I'm lying.
Superintendent appoints.
I lied, because this is not just for non-unit.
No, this is for everybody.
Yeah,
I would
so it
keep
can't be
this,
folded
I
in.
would keep
Yep, I
this
lied.
as a separate policy, but I think we also need to go back to the new changes in regulations in site-based management and all, because
Yeah.
we need to follow state law.
But I think they update, like, this is 2019, so it's updated,
Okay.
I think, for that, I would hope. Like, the timing seems like it would be, but we'll check.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can read the two in harmony right now, as long as the authoritative piece.
Oh, yeah, it's right in
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So I think
A1.
this was a result of that.
100%.
It's just, was there something, Jen, that,
Well, it just, where was it? I saw something
So is there-
struck out at me that said. Compensation for personnel assigned to individual schools who are not covered by a collective bargaining agreement shall be determined by the school committee. So that kind of, it's keeping it very vague as to what we're basing compensation off of, whereas the
That's your
other
GCB
policy.
people, sort of,
Right,
right?
yeah,
Your
yeah.
non-union employees.
Right.
Yep.
but like, but is that really, like, I'm trying to, like, for example,
And then,
like, that makes sense for, like, a principal maybe, but, like, does it make sense for, I don't know, like, a physical therapy assistant.
You know, that would be the
like-
building-based person, right? But they weren't, since they're not, if that's a building-based person and they're not subject to the union, then that would come from the principal's recommendation to the superintendent. But approved, again, this is where it gets weird, but then according to this, approved by a contract from the school committee. But what has happened in the past is they may not have had that contract, they may have just gone to this quote-unquote GCB employee person and just followed the policy.
So for OFL, they kind of just follow the policy, it doesn't, with hiring,
Well, they have their own.
yeah.
So I guess that's the question, with this one, where does this fit, does it fit, is there a crossover? Do we need to update it based on any changes that we're making to GCB?
I don't think so, I mean, I'm not.
Yeah, this one right now is good, this one
Yeah, I
complies
think
with the
this
law
one
as written, I think you may have to
stays the way
tweak
it is. I
GCB
wouldn't-
or your practice, actually.
I would leave this the way it is.
Do you want that?
Yeah, I wouldn't make any changes to this one.
No, this one complies with the law. This is good.
I just wanted to add one thing on the GCP. You had mentioned about having something related to co-pays on health insurance passing. I just wanted to you're welcome to put whatever you want in there. I just don't want to put like a hard dollar figure that has to be reviewed.
Right, no. I was just saying, like, if there's a difference anyway, we should make sure that we're not having those differences.
Oh,
Like,
this is,
knowing
we
that
offer
whatever,
John Smith,
like, what
and
we
this
offer.
with these plans.
Right,
Yeah.
like whatever we're offering, pretty much as our health package, that's what everyone should
Got it.
get.
Sounds good.
So if it's,
I do have a timeline.
okay, yeah, no, I'm trying to, yeah. So if it's okay with everybody, we'll move the remaining discussion on these GCBs, not to the next policy subcommittee on the 21st, because that's gonna be carried over from the annual health report, but it would be for the one after that, which would be September 4th. Well, that's a holiday, I gotta change that date, but to that, whatever that, not the next one, but the one
Yeah.
after, does that make sense?
Our first meeting in September.
Our first meeting in September. Does that work? Does that give time to review it and? Okay.
And then Jenny, you just tabling the.
Yeah, we'll table the transgender student policy and that will come back on the annual health report.
Do we want
discussion.
anyone in the administration to look, is there anyone specific that you'd like to give feedback on that one from?
We actually already have two model policies and it's actually the same policy, Jamestown and Providence, to compare ours to.
Yeah.
And then I have some updates from Lesson's new model policy just to discuss when we do discuss it.
What is that?
The transgender student, Lesson is issued a new model policy, and I went through it today, and there's some stuff that they have that we don't have. Well, that isn't in the proposed changes, so just to kind of review all that, so that will roll over to the next meeting in August. If nobody has anything else, I'll make a motion to adjourn.
One second.
All right. All in favor?